Do you dream in color or do you dream in black and white? First time I was asked that question a year or so ago, I had to think about it for a little while. Let's do a quick survey. How many of you dream in color? Oh, well, good. How many of you dream in black and white? That would be the rest of you then. How many of you don't have a clue whether you dream in that? Okay. Well, I dream in color. Oh, I don't know that it makes any difference whether you dream in color or black and white. I dream in color, and I had just a vivid dream last night. A panoramic dream. Would you like for me to share with you that dream? Say yes. Okay, good. Good. Because I sure was wanting to. I dreamed last night that I had died. That's the sad part. But I had died. The good part is I went to heaven. I made it. And there I am at the pearly gates, standing in line, waiting to get to talk to the Apostle Peter. You have to go to the checkout point before you get in. And I'm waiting to get up there. I'm just a few back. And as I try to shuffle along my next step up, something's tugging at me. And I look down at my ankle, and I notice it's shackled. That seemed kind of strange to me. And I noticed there was a chain attached to it. And I began to visually follow that chain. And I noticed that the chain had a shackle that was attached to another ankle. And I'm looking at this thing, and I began to visually work my way up. And then all of a sudden I see who I'm attached to, and I jump back. It was the ugliest, homeliest looking girl I'd ever seen in my life. And it just scared me to death. And I was confused. Why am I shackled to this female? My turn now, and there's the Apostle Peter, and I say, now Pete, buddy, friend of mine, fellow minister of the gospel, what's going on? Why in the world am I shackled to this albatross? Pete said, now Russ, you know you weren't perfect when you were on earth, and I had to admit that's true. He said, in fact, you committed a few sins that really weren't good. I mean, they just were kind of rough. And I had to admit that was true. He said, well, your punishment is that you're shackled to this woman in heaven. Oh, man. Okay, open the gates, let me in. He opens the gates, I go in, and I begin to view the sights of heaven. What a spectacular place. Beauty all around me. And I'm moseying along, looking at everything, taking the sights in, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see somebody that I recognize. And I turn to see who it is, and I see our worship pastor, Andy. He must have died and went to heaven too. And so I took out after him. I'm running. I get over there to him, and I give him a great big bear hug. I was so excited to see him. And as I'm giving him a hug, I look down and I notice he's got a shackle on him too. And I began to follow his shackle, and it was attached to an ankle. And I began to work my way up, and I jumped back because he was attached to the most gorgeous, beautiful woman I'd ever seen, except for my wife, that I'd ever seen in my whole life. Well, you can tell real quickly I didn't like this at all. This didn't seem to be fair. I didn't like this. So I left Andy there, and I meandered over to where the Apostle Peter was and said, hey, Pete, how come you got me shackled to this homely-looking girl, but you've got Andy shackled to a beautiful woman, the most beautiful woman ever that I've ever seen except for my wife? He said, well, Russ, let me tell you why. You see, when she was on earth, she committed a few sins too. I'm going to pay for that one. I just want you to know. Let me ask you to take your outline out this morning. It's in your worship folder. I'm going to talk about dreams. I'm going to talk about how we really should dream bigger. Some of us don't dream at all, but we should. And I'm not talking about those dreams that we do nothing about, those dreamers that never seem to do anything. I'm talking about real dreams, God-given dreams. And I want us to look today, this morning, on how we can dream bigger. In Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, it says, God, by His mighty power at work within us, is able to do far more than we would ever dare to ask or even dream of. Infinitely beyond our highest prayers, desires, thoughts, or hopes. I want you to notice something about this passage, this verse. It says that God's able to do far more than we would ever dare to even ask or dream of or think of for ourselves. He would do even more. You see, the ability to dream is a God-given gift. In fact, it's our ability to dream that separates us from the animals. The animals aren't able to dream. In fact, there's no creation that God has outside of humans that has the ability to dream. We alone are given the ability to dream. We serve and love and were created by a creative God. And He wants you and me to be creative, and part of that process is to dream, is to visualize. The ability to dream is a powerful force that can be used for good or for evil. In fact, Napoleon said, imagination rules the world. Every great achievement that's ever been done, whether it's in ministry or leadership or company or any area, it started with somebody having a dream. Because nothing starts happening until somebody starts dreaming. Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Now, Einstein, one of the smartest people ever, and he says, it begins with imagination, it begins with a vision, it begins with a dream, even above knowledge. Everybody needs a dream. I have found that one of the struggles in leadership and in ministry is that people get started, whether it be a ministry or in leadership or whatever it may be, they get started and they're all pumped up and they're excited and they've got this huge dream of all the things they want to see God accomplish in that area that they're working in, that they're serving in. And what I have seen is that in a very short time, that big dream shrinks down to the size of the situation that they're serving in. That most people, unfortunately, don't go beyond the current circumstance or situation that they are in. And they lose that vibrancy, they lose that vision, that dream, that goal. And so I believe that periodically we need to be stretched. We need to learn how to dream bigger. And I believe that the history of this church, this short history of our church, I believe is a testimony to the power of a God-given dream. I hope that you've seen the Discovery Fellowship vision. It's in our brochure out on the table. If you have not got one of those and read it, taken it home, please do so. This brochure, this vision brochure, is actually a quote taken from my pre-launch message that I did on March 28, 1999. Some of you were here. Actually, we're at Austin Elementary. Some of you were there at that time. And you remember that it was the Sunday before we launched Discovery Fellowship. It was the Sunday before Easter when we had our official grand opening. It was during that time, that message, that I gave the dream, I gave the vision of Discovery Fellowship. And talked about what God had for us. Let me share some of that with you very briefly this morning. Many of you have probably never heard it. If you've never gotten that brochure, then you've not heard the vision. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship to be a place where the hopeless, the hurting, the lonely, the depressed, and the confused can find love, acceptance, help, hope, encouragement, and a future. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with the thousands of residents that live in Weatherford and Parker County and even the surrounding area. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of welcoming over 5,000 people. Yes, I said over 5,000 members into our fellowship, worshiping, loving, serving in unity and in harmony. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of welcoming over 10,000 people in attendance each weekend. By the way, let me clarify that one of the plans that we have is going to multiple services. We're months away, maybe years away. But our plan, our future plan is to have at least 2 services on Sunday and in the morning and 1 on Saturday night, and maybe more if we need to. And so it is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of welcoming over 10,000 people in attendance each weekend as the love of Christ is lived, witnessed, and proclaimed. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of developing people, you and others, towards spiritual maturity through worship, through Bible study, through small groups, and through personal training. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of encouraging and equipping every believer for a significant ministry by helping them discover and use their gifts, their talents that God has given them. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of developing hundreds of leaders for ministry, as well as full-time pastors, missionaries, education ministers, youth ministers, children's ministers, music and drama ministers, media ministers for service here at Discovery Fellowship and even around the world. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of starting at least 15 daughter and or mission churches. Incidentally, church, we've already helped 2. We helped 1 6 months ago get started. We are now in the process of helping another. And I ask you to pray for them. It's Mid-City Community Church in the Metroplex. They launch their church next Sunday. What an exciting time that they're in for. We are helping them do that. It is the vision of Discovery Fellowship of owning 25 plus acres. We're a third of the way there. Of land that will contain beautiful facilities which will include a worship center seating thousands, separate worship space for children and for our youth, education space, nurseries, offices, conference rooms, music and drama space, reception area, recreational facilities, ample parking, counseling and prayer centers, training rooms. All of this designed to minister to the total person, not just one part, but the total, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and socially. And this will be set in an inspirational setting with trees, plants, water, and landscaping. I concluded that message with this question. To the group that was there that morning, I concluded by asking, how can I stand here before them and now before you and make such a claim? How can I do that? Because it is a God-given dream. It is a God-given vision. It is inspired from God. Folks, that is the power of a dream. We had about 60 people there a year ago. And actually, that was the total number. We had about 40 adults because the kids and the babies were somewhere else. So I'm talking to about 40 adults, and a number of those were new because our postcards that went out for Easter went out 2 weeks early. And so we had a number of people show up early, a week early, which was fine. But a number of people I didn't even know. And I just know by a look on their faces when I got through with the vision, they were looking at me like, fat chance. You expect to do that? Have you seen the price of land in Parker County? You must have lost your marbles. They had to be looking around saying, you've got a handful of people here. How in the world are you going to get to 5,000 and 10,000? I could see it in their faces, in some of their faces. Some of you have that look right now, by the way. They had to be thinking pie in the sky. No way. Those of you that were here March 28th, 1999, and you've been here for a year, you don't doubt it as much, do you? Because you've seen God in one short year do nothing short of a miracle. And so if you've been here a year, you don't have as much trouble believing this vision, this dream anymore, because you've seen God do enormous things. And I got to share with you, when God gave me this vision several years ago, from that moment forward, I've never doubted it. Not for a moment. I had people tell me not to put it on the website, not to put it in a brochure. Russell, how can you put something out there like that? Because it's from God. And if He says it, I believe it, we're going to do it. Great things come from small beginnings. Catch this when God is in it. But you've got to start with a dream. And if you're going to be involved in ministry, if you're going to be involved in leadership, you've got to be a dreamer. Not that kind of dreamer that just sort of dreams stuff up and never does anything. But a dreamer who sees it, who sees what God wants, the end result, and then takes the necessary steps to get there. If you haven't already figured it out, you will soon. This church is on the go. It's always expanding. It's always growing. It's always reaching out, trying new things. Why? Because we want to please God. The Bible says without faith, it is impossible to please God. And faith begins by stretching our imagination. Faith begins by visualizing the invisible. And folks, you and I cannot accomplish the impossible until we first see the invisible. And faith begins by catching a dream, by catching a vision. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is perceiving as real what is not revealed in the senses. And so my goal this morning is to stretch you. I want to give you some steps, some practical steps on how you can dream bigger than you've ever dreamed before. And I want to share with you that this will work in your ministry, absolutely, but it'll also work in your own homes, with relationships. It'll work in the workplace. It'll work at school. These steps that I'm going to give you will make you a better you in every area of your life. I want to start by quoting someone. The guy's name is William Carey. Some of you may have heard of his name. He's the first modern missionary. When nobody was going abroad to share the good news, he did. The first one. And he had a quote himself that he lived by. And it's now famous, and I want you to know this quote. It's in your outline there. And it begins by saying, attempt, if you want to write that in, attempt great things for God. And then secondly, expect great things from God. Did you catch that? Attempt great things for God. You can't dream anything too big. It's not possible. Make the dream huge. Attempt great things for God, and then you follow that up by expecting great things from God. Expect it. God delights in that. Everybody needs a dream. It is our dreams that define us. And so let me give you this morning 8 steps to dreaming bigger. These, by the way, are the steps that I used to get the Discovery Fellowship vision. And these are the steps that I used for God to expand the dream, to clarify the dream. Because you see, when God gave me the dream in the beginning, it wasn't real clear up front, because I, like maybe many of you, get Polaroid vision. Has anyone here taken a Polaroid snapshot? And it comes out, and you have to do something I hate to do, which is wait. You have to sit there and wait. And it's fuzzy in the beginning, and then as time goes on, it gets clearer and clearer until it's picture perfect. That's how God normally works. He gives you the fuzzy dream at first, and then you begin to work on it and grow and pray and think it through, and it becomes clearer and clearer. And these 8 steps will help that vision, that dream that God is trying to give you, become clearer in your mind and in your heart. Let me begin with step number 1. You've got to open your mind to God. I've got to open my mind to God. Now, if you're going to do this, you've got to be quiet. You've got to schedule a time of silence, of solitude. In other words, you've got to be alone with God. Now, if you're like me and you get alone with God, He has to kind of thump me and say, could you be quiet long enough for me to talk? and maybe you have that struggle too, you have to get alone with God and be quiet. You've got to let Him talk to you, share with you what He wants to reveal to you. You've got to get God's perspective on your life. Proverbs 28 says, a man is foolish to trust himself, but those who use God's wisdom are saved. And Proverbs 2:6 says, it is the Lord who gives wisdom. This is what separates us from normal secular goal setting, is that the starting point is tuning in to God. And remember the verse in the Bible that says, be still and know that I am God. The truth of the matter is your intuition can be wrong. If you're going on intuition before getting with God, your intuition can be wrong. It may not be, but it can be wrong. I've had people come up to me and say, Russell, I had a dream. I had a vision for this new venture, this new job, this new career, this new ministry, whatever it may be. And it fell flat. It failed miserably. I said, well, did you talk to God? Yeah. I asked God to bless it. Didn't work. I said, well, I think you got it backwards there. The goal is that we don't ask God to bless our agenda. We ask God to set our agenda. You see the difference? It's not God, bless my dream. It's God, you give me the dream and let me follow it through. God has not promised to bless whatever you do. He's promised to bless what you do that He wants you to do that's in His will. That's what He blesses. And so you and I have got to get alone with God and say, God, what is your will? And that's what I did 4 years ago. God, what is it you have for me? What kind of ministry do you want me to have? What do you want me to pursue? God, what's your will? Second thing is you've got to do some research. Do some research. After you've gotten alone with God and you're starting to get a vision or a picture or a dream, you've got to go to work. You've got to do some research. You don't want to make any decisions out of ignorance. Proverbs says every man acts out of knowledge. 18:13 says, what a shame, how stupid to decide before knowing the facts. And then Proverbs 23:23 says, get the facts at any price. Unfortunately, this is the part that many people ignore. They pray about something, they begin to get a vision or a dream, and then they go out and start doing it before they've done any research, before they've thought it through, before they've gotten some facts. One of the major causes of failures, whether in ministry or in business, is uneducated enthusiasm. I've seen people, talk to people, especially since I'm out in the business world, said, I love gizmos. I love gizmos, and because I love them, I think everybody else loves gizmos. And I'm going to open up a gizmo shop. And I know everyone's going to want to buy gizmos because I love gizmos. I'm excited. Let's do it. And they open up the gizmo shop, and nobody wants gizmos. And it goes belly up. If they would have done their research, if they would have done their homework, they would have discovered that in that particular area, they didn't want gizmos. They didn't care about gizmos. That comes with doing research. Part of the research that I did for Discovery Fellowship before I even showed up here was to find out all about people who lived in Weatherford. I found out what kind of people lived here, what kind of people were moving in, what the average income is, what the average age group is, the family size, the whole 9 yards. I knew the people of Weatherford before I ever showed up. And that's why I came up with a composite of who we were looking for, called Weatherford Wayne and Weatherford Wendy. If you take 101, I'm going to tell you all about Weatherford Wayne and Wendy. Now, since we bought this new land, I'm going to change that to Parker County Pete and Parker County Pam. Get the facts. Do the research. Call the people who have been where you want to go. Talk to them. Attend seminars. Read books. Do research. Number 3, start asking for advice. Start asking for advice. You've got to go to people and ask them, based on their experience, what do they know? What do they suggest? Talk to somebody who's already taken the risk. I can't tell you how many church planters I talked to before I showed up here. I wore them out and still talk to a lot of them, particularly those that are further along than I am, because I want to know what to expect 6 months from now and a year from now. I go and I seek out and I read books and I ask advice. What have been their struggles? What have been their successes? What's worked? What hasn't? Proverbs says the more advice you get, the more likely you are to win. Get good advice and you will succeed. You know what? You've heard the expression, it's wise to learn from experience. And that's true. I don't have any qualms with that, but can I suggest something to you? It's wiser to learn from the experience of others. Folks, I don't know about you, but in all that I want to do for God in my lifetime, I can't waste any time making my own mistakes. I'd rather find out the people that are before me, that find out what mistakes they made so I don't make them. I want to learn from them so I can eliminate that. I'm going to make plenty on my own. But I don't need the additional mistakes that come with not finding out first, asking advice, seeking help and counsel and guidance from others. Those that are in leadership that are around me, and those that, the more you know me, and I have a daughter like this, it's kind of cool to watch this. I wear them out by asking questions. I just constantly ask questions. What do you think about that? What about this? What's your take on this? Always asking questions. Because I need to learn, I need to know, I need to make wise decisions, and that only comes through asking the advice of others. You've got to ask them, what can you learn? What can help me? In Proverbs 18:15, the intelligent man is always open to new ideas. In fact, he even looks for them. You've got a choice here. You can either ask someone for advice which will demonstrate some ignorance, and I don't mean that in a negative light, lack of knowledge on your part, or you can just prove it to everybody by marching forward without knowing what you're doing. Either way, they're going to find out. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd rather do it on the front end so that my actions are correct actions. That means that you've got to humble yourself. It means you've got to go to people and say, I don't know, but I think you do. You've got to be teachable. One of the things that we stress here is that leaders are learners. Leaders are students. And learners are leaders. I'm scared of the person who thinks they know all the stuff and they're not willing to learn. Number 4, you've got to, and I've got to establish some priorities. Establish some priorities. You've got to think through your dream in a logical order. I mean, it's just not all going to materialize. You've got to think about that dream, that vision, and go, now how can I'm here at point A, and I want to get to point B. How do I get there? What are the logical, sequential steps that I need to take? For myself in Discovery Fellowship, I developed a clear-cut plan. I mean, I knew step by step exactly what we needed to do and when we needed to do it. Because I made out that list. I thought it through, prayed it through, talked to others, established some priorities. Proverbs 17:24 says, an intelligent person aims at wise actions, but a fool starts off in many directions. And so the question you've got to ask is, what's my target? Or who? It may be who is your target. That was the question I asked. It wasn't what, it was who. Who is the target of Discovery Fellowship? And we have a target. And you've got to ask that question. Selection is part of the process. Most churches that I know have what's called a shotgun approach to ministry. They just hope to reach everybody. Everybody will do these things and it'll minister to everybody. And they're not effective at anything. We want to be laser. We want to know who we're going after. Because once we know who, then we can develop all the programs and ministries that best suit the people that we're after. Establishing priorities. Number 5, evaluate the cost. Evaluate the cost. Proverbs 20 and 25 says, it's a trap for a man to dedicate something rashly and only later consider his vows. You've got to evaluate the cost. You've got to ask yourself 3 questions concerning your dream, your vision. First question is it necessary? I constantly evaluate steps. Is step number 3 necessary to get where I want to go? If it's not, we eliminate it. You've got to, is this step necessary? Is it vital to the overall dream, the overall goal, the overall mission? If it's not, eliminate it. The second question is, what will it cost? In terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of energy, in terms of reputation, it's going to have a price tag. And you've got to ask yourself, what's it going to cost? You have to know that. The third question that you have to ask is, once you know the price tag, is it worth it? Because frankly, some things that you may come up with, think of, and that I think of, may not be worth it once we consider the price tag. And so you've got to ask yourself, is it worth it? You know, I got the dream for Discovery Fellowship and thought all this through, and I thought, oh my goodness. You know what this is going to cost? It's going to cost my entire life. Not a portion of it, not a big chunk of it, my entire life. And every day, particularly Sundays, but every day, as I minister and I see your faces, and I see what God's doing in your life, I thank Him every day and say, it is more than worth it. But you've got to ask yourself that. 6, plan for problems. Plan for problems. Jesus said a couple things. He said, no wise builder starts building without a budget. And no king goes off to war without counting the cost. He says that you need to plan in advance and to factor in problems. Proverbs 20:18 says, don't go charging into a battle without a plan. Anybody here heard of Murphy's Law? Okay, let me just tell you something. You can take it to the bank. It's going to happen. It is going to happen. Donald Trump said one time, I expect the best, but I plan for the worst. I think that's pretty good advice. Pretty good insight. Let me encourage you, when you're in ministry, whatever it is, ushering, parking, in the band, in children's area, whatever area you're in, be ready for problems because they are going to come up, and you have two choices to make. You can let the problem hunt you down, means you're running from it. Incidentally, it will hunt you down. You can let it hunt you down, or you can face it head on. You can say, I see a problem brewing right here in this area, or with that person or with that group, and you can meet it head on so that it's on your terms and your turf. In which case, it's more likely to get resolved, or you can let it defeat you by hunting you down. The other thing I want to share with you concerning problems in ministry is this, and this may be tough for some of you because it's very tough for me, is you're not going to be 100% successful. Forget it. It ain't going to happen this side of heaven. And those of you that are high achievers and have perfectionistic tendencies, you're going to have to get over it because you're not going to be 100% successful. You're just not going to be. You're setting yourself up for a big disappointment, a big fall, if that is what you are expecting. We have done, in our short time, we've done a number of things here that hadn't worked. We have. You know what my reply to that is? So what? Big deal. Who cares? Oh, sorry, that's a Leanne Rimes song, but... So what? You just either try to do it better or chunk it and go on to the next thing. You can't be afraid of failure because it will happen on occasion. Proverbs 22:3 says, the sensible man watches for problems ahead and he prepares to meet them. But the simpleton never looks and suffers the consequence. So you got to ask yourself, what's going to happen if something goes wrong with the dream? What's going to happen if it doesn't happen the way I think it's supposed to happen? You've got to ask yourself, that's not being pessimistic, that's being sensible, that's planning for problems to occur. Number 7 is be willing to risk. Be willing to risk. That means be willing to face your fears. I have learned that the reason why people aren't willing to take risks is because they're not willing to face their fears. Proverbs 29 says, the fear of man is a dangerous trap, but to trust God means safety. We hate to admit it when we're afraid, don't we? Most of us do. We don't like to admit that we're afraid of something. We pretend. But God says that we should go ahead and admit it. In our culture, we view fear as a sign of weakness. We have slogans that say, never let them see you sweat. Because we view it as a sign of weakness. But I got to tell you, fear is a sign of humanity. I want you to understand something about courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. Because where there's no fear, you don't need courage. But courage is moving ahead in spite of your fear. You see, it doesn't take courage for me to get up in the morning and brush my teeth. But it takes a tremendous amount of courage for my wife to kiss me before I do. But sometimes she'll move ahead in spite of her fear. The married people here really got that one. People ask me oftentimes, were you afraid in getting Discovery Fellowship started? As if I'm going to say no. Folks, I was terrified. That first Easter Sunday, I was scared to death. I didn't show it, I don't think, but I was wondering, is anybody going to show up? God, I sure hope they do. And you know what? I still have that feeling. I still, God, I'm confident. I believe in you, but man, is this thing really going to work? That's a healthy thing. Because what it requires me to do is turn it over to God. It requires me to be dependent on Him. You've got to be willing to take risks. The Bible says reverence for the Lord gives confidence and security. Here's the thing. Here's the reason why I can move out even in those moments of fear, and why you can too. When I am convinced that God is in it, that it's His vision and His dream and not mine, it gives me confidence. And while I sometimes experience fear or wonderment, sometimes even doubt, I take the next step because I'm convinced that God is there and in it and wanting me to move out. And it's faith in God, believing that that dream is from Him, that gives you and me the courage to go ahead and move out, regardless of what the critics say. You would just be flabbergasted and I won't share them with you, but if I shared some of the emails that have come to me after I sent out our postcards. But I don't let it get to me. You know, my thinking is, well, if you feel that way, I don't guess we'll see you Sunday. But somebody else will come. See, to me what matters is what God has to say. Number 8, do it now. Do it now. Proverbs 16:3 says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. See, there's got to come a point where you actually do it. Okay, you visualized, you've dreamed, you've made the steps, you've mapped it out, you've planned, you've prepared, you've done all that. But folks, there's got to come a time when you take the step. If you wait until everything's perfect, you're never going to move out. You've got to take that step. And I want to share something with you. It's when you take that first step and that second and that third step that you're going to receive the confirmation. Because I got to tell you, until you actually take the step, you won't know for certain. Because at that point, it's still internal. You believe it, you've prayed it through, you've thought it through, but that's all internal stuff. It's when you take the step that God will confirm. When we had 175 people show up for our opening service, praise God, we're on the road. It was confirmation. And I could go on and on about the number of times that has been confirmed to me that the vision is of God and that we are moving in the right direction. But it all happened because we stepped out. And you've got to step out. Whatever your dream is, in your relationship, in ministry, at work, a new business, whatever it may be, you've got to, at some point, you've got to step out and do it. Don't expect God to have everything ready for you. Don't expect everything to be in perfect order. Because I got to tell you this, if God had mapped everything out for me and told me every step of the way, and this is waiting on you and that's waiting on you, what faith? That doesn't take faith at all. And God is not going to do that, and He didn't with me. And He won't with you. He takes it a step at a time. Okay, Russell, you took that step. You're going to take the next one. All right, you took that one. You're going to take another one. And that's what He's going to do for you too, and I want you to know that. That you've got to keep moving out. Even after you take that initial step, you've got to take another one and another one. And God will bless that and He will honor that. And there are some people say, well, now what happens if I fail? Does that mean that God wasn't in it? No, it does not mean that. There are times when God is in it that we fail anyway. Now that may be strange to some. Maybe some of you have never heard this before, this teaching. But let me share with you, sometimes we fail and God is in it. Do you want to know why? Because it's from our failures that we learn so much. And God has something to teach us. When we fail, we shouldn't look at it in a bad way. We go, okay, what can I learn from this? Because God's going to use this for something else greater and bigger. I got to tell you something. Had I not pastored another kind of a church for a couple of years, I would not be able to pastor this church. God used my ministry at another church to hone in some things that I needed to work on. Some things that were really going to come into play at this church, and I didn't know it at the time, because I was banging my head against the wall trying to figure out why it wasn't happening the way I thought it should. But now I see that God was using those perceived failures to get me ready for this step. And He's going to do the same thing in your life too. Thomas Edison said, never call it a failure, call it an education. My goal this morning as I wrap up is that I truly want you to dream bigger dreams. That go beyond your present condition, your present circumstances and situation. I want you to accomplish greater things for God. And more importantly than what I want is what God wants. And I truly believe that He wants you to dream bigger dreams for Him. I truly believe He wants you to accomplish greater things for Him. Attempt great things for God. And expect great things from Him. Would you pray with me? God, how we praise You today for the ability that You have given us to dream. God, our prayer is that You impact our lives with the dream You have for us. And then, Lord, let us follow up with that. Let's take all the steps that are necessary to pray it through, to think it through, to strategize, to plan, but then to step out. God, would it be our heart's desire that we stop thinking so small? That we stop just looking around us and using what we see as a barometer for the dream? Help us to look into Your eyes, to see the world as You see it, a place of so many opportunities. And my prayer for us as individuals, as families, and as a church is that You would do enormous things through us that would impact our lives, but would impact this county and this area, all for Your glory. I'm asking You, Lord, I'm praying for You to do this in each of our lives. Let us begin with that first dream. A dream that comes from Your heart, which is that we receive Christ as the leader of our life. And then we begin living out that life that's modeled for us, that's taught to us in Your Word, the Bible. That we may lift it up to You and lift our lives up to You. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.